Welcome to News 133 Online. I'm Tim Underhill, and this is the introduction to multimedia video to help tell your stories. My background is primarily in television news. I do some video production work, freelance work, but I consider myself mostly a storyteller. I love storytelling, and hopefully you'll get bitten by the storytelling bug as well. So let's talk a little bit about what News 133 is. We're going to start off by introducing you to some ideas, some techniques, some tools of storytelling. We'll talk about cameras, microphones, lighting. We'll talk about writing and how to shoot and edit video. And you can use your cell phones. It's amazing how much you can get out of a cell phone these days. So that's what we're going to start off with. We're not going to presume that anyone knows anything, starting off at ground zero. So if you've had some background in this, you may need to forget what you've learned, and you may, in order to do things correctly, which is kind of fun. So that's what this is going to be about. There are two main themes that this class is going to cover. If you look at the big picture, the first main theme we're going to cover is just because you see it on TV doesn't mean it's good. And what do I mean by that? There's a lot of things that you see on television that is not done properly. There are a lot of mistakes, there are a lot of issues, technical or poor storytelling, or just a lot of things that take away from the story. And that's what we don't want to do. So you don't come to me and say, oh, well, I've seen them do that on channel whatever. It doesn't float. So that's the first thing. Understand that just because you see it on television doesn't mean it's good. The second main theme is my goal as a storyteller is to have the medium become transparent. What I mean is that the story is paramount and distractions should be eliminated. We'll talk more about eliminating distractions later on, but that's what we're trying to do. And I will try to introduce you to a theme that I call organic storytelling along the way. What I mean is telling stories the way the mind and the eye naturally work. Okay, so we got an understanding of where we're going to start. Well, let's think about it for a second, though. Why do we have news? Why do we have news in newspapers, radio, television, even news on the internet? It's kind of important. We need to know what we're doing. Now we need to know why we're doing it. Well, some people say that people have a right to know. It's our job to inform them. In many cases, they'll say they need to know. And so news is there to inform the public. Sometimes news can entertain. It's another reason we might have news, to entertain the audience. This is one of my favorites. We have news to preserve history. Think of it as capturing that slice of time, that moment in time as history moves on. Because it's digital, it's preserved forever. But I will tell you, there's one overreaching thing we must not forget. And that's that we have to have news to make money. We make money. Now, I tell you, if I didn't make money, I couldn't print my paper. I couldn't keep my transmitter on. I couldn't pay to register my domain name. So it's real important that we have that. That's why we have it, because it's a business. Understand who your audience is. So that's the other side of that. If nobody's going to be reading or listening or watching your stories, there's no reason to do it. So we need to understand that it is a business. Now, the other side of that is that money should not determine what stories we're covering. Every television station I've worked at, not only is the news and sales department separate, they were on different floors. Thankfully, I've never been in the situation where the general manager calls and says, hey, you should go do a story with this car dealer. He's our biggest advertiser. Thankfully, it doesn't happen for me. I have never experienced that. But, you do have to remember who your audience is. Just don't have that be the reason you do a story is money. All right, that's good. So there are other reasons. What makes what makes something newsworthy? What makes it so that we will want to do a story about a topic, an issue, a person, or a character? Well, relevance, usefulness, and interest are the broadest of broad guidelines for judging the news value of a story. It's a great place to start. But within those guidelines, there are 7 elements. Those 7 elements spell out the word cute pip. And those 7 elements are conflict, uniqueness, timeliness, emotion, proximity, impact, and prominence. So if you can come up with a couple of those elements, then your story is going to be relevant. Well, let's talk a little bit about each one and what that means. Conflict. Think about your favorite movie, your favorite book. If it's got conflict, it makes it much more interesting. That conflict could be man against man, could be man against nature, man against time. Maybe it's a track meet. Could be man against City Hall. So anytime there's a conflict, makes that an interesting story. What's important to note, though, is if you have conflict, that you really need to make sure that you have resolution. Your conflict needs to have resolution. Now, the story you're covering may not have an end to the story, the issue. The issue may be continuing. Maybe you're covering the elections and the elections haven't happened yet. Maybe you're covering a court trial and the jury is still out. But whatever it is, the story that you're doing needs to have resolution. You need to have an ending. What you do not want to do is end your story with something like, only time will tell what will happen to these people, or we'll just have to wait and see. Those are not endings, okay? That is not a resolution to the conflict. But how do you do that? Well, let's say, for example, neighborhood where I live, there are no sidewalks. The lady down the street wants to have sidewalks so her kids aren't playing in the street. And so she gets a city council member to come over and talk. And so we go out and shoot pictures. We got video of her kids playing in the street. We interview her, interview the city councilman. All right, that's really nice. They've started a process, but there's no end. We've introduced a conflict. The kids are unsafe by where they play in the street. What's the resolution? Well, they haven't done anything yet. So I can't just say, we'll just have to wait and see what happens to these children in the Orchard Park neighborhood. Only time will tell if one of them gets hit by a car. No, seriously, we're not going to do that. But what I can do is have an end to my story. And that end of my story might be something like, City Council meets on Monday. It will vote on the ordinance. Now I've got an end, I got a resolution to my conflict, but it's not an end of the issue, not an end of the story. So they're going to vote on it Monday. I'm going to tell. That's how I'm going to end it. The other thing that has done is give me an opportunity for a follow-up story. Research has proven their audience wants follow-ups. Whatever happened to this situation? It helps me continue to create content. So follow-up's a good thing. So conflict is a great story starter. If you, again, looking for your story to have these elements, one or more of these elements to make it newsworthy. The second element is uniqueness. This is probably my favorite one. I love unusual stories. I love the quirky, the novelty. It's a story about the man biting the dog, not the dog biting the man. So if it's unusual, then it makes it newsworthy. Timeliness. It is called news. It is not called olds. So something is timely. If it's happening now, then it becomes newsworthy. Say, for example, if there was a big traffic jam out on McGalliard this morning, it's not going to be newsworthy tomorrow. People just aren't going to care that there was a traffic jam. It's newsworthy today because it's happening today. Other than that, we don't care. So timeliness, we need to get it happen. If it's happening, it makes it newsworthy. Now, we used to talk about 6 of these. We've added a 7th, and that is emotion. And it's not just the story displays emotion, but if your story can elicit emotion, then boy, that really makes it newsworthy. Emotion is the only one of these 7 elements that must have another one, at least one other, to help it move along. So you try to have as many of these elements as you can. I'm still looking, by the way, for the one that has all 7. If you find that story, let me know. But emotion, eliciting emotion, it's something that we realize, especially with television and video, that there are opportunities that you can really convey and elicit emotion, and that makes it much more newsworthy. Proximity. I'm more interested in something happening in my neighborhood, in my town, than I am something happening half a world away. So the closer it is to your audience in proximity, the more newsworthy it becomes. I want to know what's going on in Muncie, not necessarily Luxembourg. Impact. The more people affected by your story, the more newsworthy it becomes. You think about stories that have to, anything that affects your money, anything that affects taxes, maybe the cost of food, or the cost of gasoline. That has a broad reaching impact. Everybody has to have food and eat, so when the costs go up, it has a big impact, and that makes it much more newsworthy. If your story only affects 1 or 2 people, hopefully one of the other elements will come in play besides impact. Prominence. For some reason, we are interested in the lifestyles of the rich and famous, heads of state, movie stars, performers. If they're doing something, it becomes newsworthy. Now, that's not to say that just because they're not prominent, that it's not newsworthy. Sometimes my favorite stories are those about people you would never know. You might even walk past every day and not know they have a story. The other thing that's interesting, prominence can also mean places, not just people. Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Indianapolis is known around the world as the racing capital of the world. It is very prominent. Something like the Eiffel Tower is very prominent. Something happens to the Eiffel Tower, it becomes newsworthy. So these are the things we're looking about. These are 7 elements to help us understand what is newsworthy. And we look to have as many of these elements in the story as we can. You still come into play later on when you're covering stories and you try to find something. And this isn't just for television. This is for all news to help us understand. So conflict, uniqueness, timeliness, emotion, proximity, impact, and prominence. That's what we're looking for.